we're here at COP right now. We're learning that the fossil fuel companies have more lobbyists here than any other, delegation in the country, in the world. We are in a climate emergency. All major social movements are actually, if you dig deeply, are won by the volunteers. So all of you out there doing your volunteer work, educating the public, educating your friends, educating everybody, you are making a difference.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for making the effort to be here at such an early hour. I know it's not easy, but it is an important topic that we have this morning. We're going to be talking about education and the importance of climate education as a means to move this movement forward, the movement of climate awareness, of getting people to understand the importance of individual actions and collective actions to do all that we can to hold those to account who are contributing the greatest to this anthropogenic climate change that we're all experiencing. And when we're speaking to education, we mean in all levels, certainly in the K through 12 education, higher level education, but also the wider society education. And one of the examples that I can give is, from my own experience, is Climate Reality Project, the organization started by Al Gore. Climate reality leaders are from around the world. The training is free. It's a week-long intensive training on the causes of climate change, what we can expect in the future in terms of climate change, and what individuals can do to try and mitigate these dire circumstances that we're all facing. So we'll be hearing from a variety of individuals who will speak to the importance of this. And the first person I want to introduce is Julie Johnston. And Julie Johnston is a sustainability education coach and consultant with Greenheart Education, greenhearted.org. She works with teachers from around the world to help them green the heart of education. She's also from Canada, I'd like to add, and we're going to be hearing from her via virtually. So if we can play that.
Okay, thanks, Regina. So I would like to present my entry that is in the Encyclopedia of the UN Sustainable Development Goals on climate action. So I'll be talking to you about the who, what, where, when, how, and I think we all know the why of climate change literacy. So a simple definition of climate change literacy is the knowledge, skills, and abilities and habits of mind and heart to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. So who is it for? Well, we can think of it individually, institutionally, and societally. And Miller and Sladek posed the question, do we need climate literacy for all? And they basically said, well, that's not realistic in the short term. But of course, a long-term goal must be basic climate literacy for everyone. Now, there are three populations that must be climate change literate in the short term. So we need to focus on these three groups: elected officials and leaders, journalists, and teachers, because those are the people who have the widest followings and the most influence. And other people who need to be climate change literate are those whose jobs must transition to zero carbon, because we want them to have a smooth ride. So they need to understand why they're doing it. So what does climate change literacy include? Well, number one is the knowledge of climate systems science. Number two is understanding of the impacts and threats of climate change. Number three is motivation to make informed decisions about mitigation and adaptation to the climate crisis. So in short, climate change literacy involves what causes climate change, what climate change causes, and what can be done about it. And those three things from a systems thinking perspective, of course, because climate is a system. So where and when does it happen? Well, certainly we would like it to happen in the formal school system, from kindergarten to postgraduate university, so primary school, secondary, and tertiary education institutions. A recent UNESCO study found that nearly half of national curriculum frameworks in 100 countries had no reference to climate change at all. So that needs to change. Non-formal education, that means people can learn about climate change through non-credit courses and workshops and seminars. And then there's informal education. So learning in the context of work and family and leisure, things like museums and libraries, but also, of course, through media. Media is where most people in the world today get their climate change knowledge and understanding from. So what are some of the challenges to climate change literacy, and how can we deal with them? So number one is denial, the opposite of climate change literacy. And it turns out, no, the issue is identification with cultural values. So that's what we have to deal with in the case of denial. It's not that people need more knowledge or understanding. Number two here, some of the terms and metaphors that we use are inaccurate or misleading. So President Obama's science advisor, John Holdren, said that global warming is an inappropriate term because it's kind of warm and fuzzy. And he used to use the term global climate disruption. Another problem is misconceptions or faulty prior knowledge when we're teaching about climate change. For example, a lot of people say, well, Earth's climate has changed in the past, so our current lifestyle can't be the cause. Well, that is more an indication of historical illiteracy and faulty leap in logic. Now, there's also the challenge of gaps in knowledge. So, for example, a lot of people are not aware that thermal expansion of ocean water can be a cause of sea level rise. Another challenge is scientific illiteracy. So a lot of people do not understand scientific concepts like weight of evidence or shifting baselines or the carbon cycle. I learned the water cycle in school, but I did not learn the carbon cycles, long-term and short-term carbon cycles. There's also the challenge that many of our leaders, educators, and journalists are climate change illiterate themselves. And so that's going to impact the people that they influence. And finally, there's cognitive dissonance when people learn the urgency of the climate emergency, but then they don't see urgent action taken by their leaders. That can lead to mental confusion and emotional turmoil. So to wrap up here, what is a climate change literate citizen? Well, it's someone who understands how the climate system works. So that's the science. They know how to distinguish fact from fiction. So that's all the literacies. They talk about climate in a meaningful way, which means they talk about it with other people. And they can make informed and responsible decisions. So I want to leave you with one last thought, and that is that climate change education must also include different lenses and perspectives, such as intergenerational, gender, and justice lenses, as well as perspectives of Indigenous peoples from around the world. And I want to thank you folks for your good work.
Well, that was really appreciated by Julie Johnston. She covered so many different aspects of education and why it's important. I want to introduce next Cathy Orlando, who works as a Citizens Climate International Program Director. With an exceptional team, she creates a framework to empower volunteers to build political will for evidence-based climate action in over 60 countries worldwide. Well, that's quite a feat. So yes, we'd love to hear more, Cathy.
Thanks, Regina. So I am Canadian as well, and I'm climate reality trained as well. I was trained in 2008 by Al Gore. And in 2010, I met another Al Gore trainee by the name of Marshall Saunders. And Marshall Saunders had founded an organization that empowers citizens to build the political will for a livable world. And my focus now is I want to do a shout out for the unsung heroes of the climate movement. And it's the countless volunteers in all the organizations around the world. Specifically, now I want to just tell the story of Citizens Climate Lobby Canada. We were founded in 2010, and our way of working is to build political will locally, and like just mentioned, it's really important that we educate our legislators and educate also our media and our local population, and that's what the volunteers do at Citizens Climate Lobby. Month after month, literally never missing a beat, we meet and discuss what sort of action we should be doing Now I'm going to pull back a little bit. We are highly focused on building the political will for an incrementally rising price on carbon pollution, with all the money going back to the people, regardless of income, regardless of your carbon footprint. That is the backstop policy that Canada has. And we've been accredited by at least 3 MPs and a minister and a senator for actually being the reason why the government chose that policy. And I say that humbly. So how did we do it? Well, literally it was done by volunteers. Between 2010 and 2017, Citizen Climate Lobby volunteers recorded 793 meetings with parliamentarians. They actually recorded it. It's really important to record your data. If you do something and don't record it, it just disappears, okay? They recorded that data. And we also, I don't have the exact numbers, but it's had around 3,000 media hits, and we lobbied at very specific engagements 13 times on Parliament Hill between those times. So we're here at COP right now. We're learning that the fossil fuel companies have more lobbyists here than any other, delegation in the country, in the world. We are in a climate emergency. All major social movements are actually, if you dig deeply, are won by the volunteers. So all of you out there doing your volunteer work, educating the public, educating your friends, educating everybody, you are making a difference. And I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to circle back to one story near the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cathy, and second that regarding the volunteers and how frightening about the fossil fuel lobbyists. It's really, really frightening. So next, we're going to hear from Paul Beckwith. Paul is a climate systems scientist and a paleoclimatologist. Paul, what are your thoughts on education and the importance of education for the future of our planet?
Thank you, Cathy and Regina. What I try to do is connect the dots on abrupt climate change. So I look at the peer-reviewed scientific papers and read them multiple times, make sure I understand exactly what they're showing, why the study was performed, and related in my mind to other studies, other recent studies and studies from long ago. And then I try to translate that science, often complex science, into everyday language with no jargon and no terms in a YouTube video, 15-minute YouTube video, which I then send out, and I also share it. I also try to promote it on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. I have over 1,500 videos, haven't counted recently, mostly 15 minutes long, and I follow up. There's lots of questions on the climate science and on other things in the comment sections of the videos, which I then go to and try to address. And I also do work with some other organizations, specifically the Climate Emergency Forum. We do weekly videos, a group of us, which is putting on this conference. And then I also give public talks, in various forums when I get a chance. There's lots of media interviews with different organizations that I do, and I also teach as a part-time occasional professor at the University of Ottawa, and I've also taught at Carleton University in Ottawa, and I teach climatology, meteorology, sometimes oceanography, mostly to first-year or second-year students, sometimes to third-year students. So I try to, as Julie pointed out, with climate literacy, there's a lot of misconceptions out there, so I try to get those, correct those misconceptions, give people sort of a basic understanding of the climate science. Also, there's lots of great websites. I'll mention a couple. Climate Reanalyzer Earth Null School. If you just Google those terms, Earth Null School in particular, has lots of information on jet streams and ocean temperatures and air temperatures and when there's an extreme weather event like a torrential rain leading to a flood, I can go and show it on Earth Null School exactly what's happening with the climate system to cause that extreme weather event. So I try to get things that are breaking in the news and explain the climate science behind them. I've been doing this for many years, and so my principal goals are to try to reach more and more people with these videos so that we get a tipping point in human understanding of how serious climate change is. So also, I find that the existing school programs are totally inadequate to explain climate. You might have climate mentioned in a geography course in high school or something, maybe a few hours, but there's no sense of urgency of the climate crisis given in high schools or in universities. And for a time there, it became more and more difficult for me to teach the climatology course because people would be asking me, what's going to happen, how bad is it? And of course, it's extremely bad. And, how can I tell these young high school students that, we're going to probably have global food shortages and famine, in 5 to 10 years, the way we're going because of the extreme weather events destroying our agricultural food growing systems. So, it's a bit difficult, but it's important to do. So I continue to do it, and I'll continue doing it. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Paul. One of the things I found particularly interesting in Julie's talk was her emphasis on the importance of media in spreading environmental education. And I find that to be so true because where are most people, as she said, going to get their information? It's going to be from, honestly, watching entertainment. And to me, that's one of the things that is just so sorely lacking. I mean, we have so many sci-fi movies, but what can be more sci-fi than the actual reality of what we're going through now? And I can only think of 2 films, one, The Day After Tomorrow, which came out a very long time ago. And I have to say the last Mad Max film, I think, did a really good job conveying the dire situation of the climate crisis. We also have in New York City, where I'm from, the Broadway Green Alliance, which emphasizes environmentally friendly practices. And I'm just wondering, Cathy, your thoughts on the importance of media, on the importance of the entertainment industry in conveying these ideas that are so hard, as Paul said, to digest.
Well, there's 2 components here. I'll talk about mainstream media and then the entertainment industry. I know at Citizens Climate Lobby, we constantly, if you can imagine, we had 3,000 media hits between 2010 and 2017. That meant we probably submitted about 30,000 letters to the editor. So our local editors really get educated by the work that we're doing. We also released about 20 media releases a year. We also lobbied the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail. National Post would never meet with us, but they eventually also endorsed our carbon pricing policy. So yeah, there is a really importance there of media being educated, and proud of the work that our volunteers have done. There's things happening in the music industry. The other night, my daughter was here. She's a climate striker, and she was at an event organized by UMA. The singer Aurora was there, and Aurora did the voice of the unknown in Frozen 2, and she sat and watched the presenters. And then she brought that on stage that night, about how much hope, all the work, and then her voice just, like, I'm getting shivers just, if you were there, she was transforming us with her voice. There's also the band Our Lady Peace, Rain Maida. He has started an organization called Future Famous. He's selected 2 Canadians so far, Autumn Pelche and my daughter, Sophia Mathur, for their work. So there is work being done. Lastly, I do agree we need a lot more movies and a lot more entertainment. And we recently at Citizens Climate International ran an event where we had a play produced by thespians in Letterkenny, Ireland, about a fantastical story about global warming that just shifted your mind. And it's called Save Our Ice. So I do agree we need the movie industry to do a lot more, though. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Paul?
Yeah. Often with media interviews, they're after sound bites. So, you might go on an interview for, several minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, and then you watch it on TV or listen on the radio, and it's like 20-second clips. So I think the media can do a lot better than just very short sound bites. Also, one group of people who are constantly on the media are weather people, right? Weather forecasters. There's efforts underway in many countries to educate the weather forecasters on climate change so that when they give their weather forecast, they can relate, say, torrential rains and flooding to, the jet streams and climate disruption, a warming Arctic. They know sort of the root causes. So we have a long way to go on that, but at least the weather forecasters in some countries, in the US, they were horrible before. I mean, they would hardly mention climate at all, but that's changing. There's groups of, some of the meteorological organizations are actively training weather forecasters to have a better understanding of climate so that they can discuss climate a lot more often in their programs. And personally, what I'd like to see is after the weather forecast in all mainstream media sessions, reports, I think they should have a climate person on giving the climate. So you get the weather report, and then after you get the climate report. Mm-hmm. And that climate report could cover, the most recent disaster, and how climate change is causing it or something like that. So it would be in the news every day, just like the weather forecast is. So, and that's also something that our colleague Stuart Scott was always pushing for. That sort of idea, make it as commonplace as weather forecasts, climate information, climate forecasts.
Thank you so much, Paul. Cathy, I wanted to see if you had any final thoughts for our panel.
Just one more thing about volunteers. I want to take a moment to acknowledge all the work that has been done by the youth. They've done so much work here and created a difference. A brief story again from Canada. In November of 2018, Canada actually became the first country outside of Europe to start striking with Greta Thunberg. In Katowice, Greta tweeted her appreciation to the Canadians that were doing this work. I know this because she tweeted directly to my daughter. So Canada has a situation where we have oil, and our media, and especially our social media, is influenced in a negative way sometimes. And the politicians have to really, like they're up against a system. I don't know how to describe that, but there's something wrong. I'm just going to say it that way. I don't want to point fingers or anything, but politicians have a really rough deal trying to create political will for climate action themselves. So I want to do a major shout out to the 210 strikes that happened in the 2 weeks that Greta Thunberg was in Canada in September of 2019. Over 1 million Canadians were on the streets, and 3 weeks later, there was an election. And I think that had to have made a difference. I think that awakened adults. Because we even though our Prime Minister had fumbled so badly in so many ways in the lead up to that election, he still managed to not lose government. And I say that political stripes aside. So to the youth out there, you are making a difference. And to the adults out there, ask them how you can help. Don't tell them how you can help. Ask them how you can help. And if you can, if there's opportunities to give money to them or help them with media, getting the media attention, please do that. So to the youth, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for all the work you've done over the past 3 years in the Fridays for Future movement and all the other movements that have run alongside that. You are making a difference. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cathy. A lot of food for thought in today's panel, and obviously it's a subject of great import. And I think it's important to emphasize, we've talked about how we can help to educate people on all levels of society. And there's really no subject that's covered in school that cannot include climate literacy, as Julie termed it, which is incredibly important. When we're speaking history, when we're teaching children about the Roman aqueducts, we can talk about water security and the importance of that. When we're talking about reading, there's our literature, there's our great stories that are accessible to all ages regarding the importance of climate. I've already mentioned Broadway Green Alliance. If someone's studying fashion, I know the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City also has programs regarding the importance of sustainability. So I just want to say that it belongs in every conversation, in every industry, in every subject, and it should always be top of mind. And I want to thank Paul for his great contribution of all of the videos that he puts out on his channel on YouTube to educate so many people, and his participation with the Climate Emergency Forum, weekly discussion to discuss the topics of import regarding the climate. And I had forgotten to introduce myself. My name is Regina Valdez, and I am as I mentioned, a climate reality leader, program director of Climate Reality in New York City, and also a member of the Climate Emergency Forum. So again, thank you so much to Cathy Orlando, to Julie Johnston, and to Paul, and also wanting to thank the organizations that made this panel possible, which includes the International Society for Ecological Economics, the Buddhist Tzu Chi Foundation, and the International Center for Sustainable Development. So thank you all once again for being here so early, and have a great day at the COP.